All right. Good evening, everyone. It is June 1st or June 2nd, rather, 2022, and this is our biweekly PAB meeting. And we do have a lot to cover today, and so I'm going to go ahead and have Ms. Pacheco start with the roll call, please.
Okay. Chair Walker, I'm sorry, Chair Wilson.
Present.
Member Settle,
Present.
Member Brown,
Present.
Member Harrison,
Here.
Member Harvey, he unmuted, but I didn't get him.
Well, we'll just say
Yeah. And Member Nikoloff.
Present.
Okay. Absent tonight is Member Knox and Member Tucker.
Okay, I believe that, I don't know if anybody heard from Larry. Is Larry not coming? I didn't hear anything, so they may be late. Okay. All right, thank you so much, Ms. Pacheco. So we're gonna go ahead and keep going. So we're gonna start with our biweekly update from Mr. Bosco.
All right, thanks everyone. Updates in regards to where we stand currently. We did a demo session with the IT department and senior staff members yesterday in regards to the intermediate case management system. That looks to be up and running. We are going to make some adjustments regarding the owners' access to it. And by owners, those are going to be the three representatives, myself, Mike, as well as Melody, that has the ability to change and delete certain functions within the case management system. Those will only be the three individuals that will have that type of access to it. There are certain other functions of the systems that are yet to be determined, but based upon the demo that we saw yesterday and our meeting scheduled for next week, that is on track to be operational so that we can start taking in complaints by our target date, which is June 20th. So everything looks in accordance with that. As it relates to investigations, the investigations training picked back up on this Monday, the 31st, and will continue throughout the remainder of this week as well as next week and a few days into the following week. There are some issues that we're going to discuss in regards to our consultants and some of the personnel matters that we're going to discuss in executive session. But the training itself has resumed and will continue to take place with our 4 staff attorneys, our 6 investigators, and 1 of the forensic technicians. In addition to that, there needs to be a discussion regarding the rules of investigations. Upon examination, it seems as though the revised rules may not have been voted on by the board, which was originally thought to have been voted on and approved. So we're going to put that before the board for a vote as well, so that we can get that cleared and moving forward. There's been several revisions to the rules of investigation since it was last before you the first week of April. So we want you to take a look at those, review them as best as you can. I'll be able to answer any questions in regards to that so that we can get that moving forward. In addition to that, the staff has been working diligently on revising and adding to the investigation manual. I have a rough draft before me currently. Once I am through with those edits, I'm going to pass those along to you as well for your approval on that matter. So the manual itself should be before you at the very latest early next week for you to review in time for an approval for our following meeting. In addition, our meeting with RPD and President Melendez is still scheduled as of right now for Monday. There was a hiccup that they notified us as of, and the timing of the meeting has changed, but the meeting is still scheduled for Monday. So once that meeting has completed, we're going to be discussing, as far as agendas on that meeting, access to the databases, timely turning over of materials and policies, as well as notice and access to crime scenes and command centers. And Mike will also touch on the public affairs update. So I'll leave that to him. In addition, I'm sorry, not the public affairs, but the policies portion of this update. As it relates to policy affairs, the most pressing issue right now is that policy affairs have come up with some events that will require funding for tabling. And with the current freeze of the budget, we're going to be seeking requisitions in order to pay for the tabling of those events. I'll be able to provide the board with a listing of those events that will require a fee for tabling, so that public affairs can be out in the community and fulfill our promise to meet the community where they are.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bosco, can I ask a couple questions, please? So the first thing that you're asking, I know that you still have yet to collect all the information that you need for fees, but this should not go over $10,000. That's correct?
Correct.
Okay. So then if there's any issue with getting the requisition signed, then you just need to let us know. There is no reason why you should not be able to get the money that you need for tabling fees, for goodness sake. So if there's any issue, just go ahead, please submit the requisitions and notify the board if you have a problem.
Will do. Thank you.
And then the second thing is if you can clarify for the public what the care management software is, so that they can kind of get their heads around what you're talking about. Please, that'd be great.
Sure. So the case management system is going to be the interim system in place of Eyesight, which we signed the contract with in order to properly intake complaints, store the complaints in a secure place where no one else outside of the case management team, as well as myself, Mike, and the chief of that division, has access to changing the information that comes forth. So at this point in time, I don't want to get into too much details in regards to the actual system itself. But what I would like to do is invite the board to have access to the same demo that was displayed to the senior staff, so that they can properly understand everything that's going to be involved with the case management system itself.
Thank you.
And all of the other updates should be discussed in executive session. And those updates regard personnel matters as well as contract matters.
All right, and I believe, Mr. Higgins, are you going to be speaking on are you speaking on something as well as regarding the update?
I can give a brief update about the Policy and Oversight Division, and then I think you also invited me here to talk a little bit about our protest policy analysis.
That's right.
Great. So what are we doing in Policy and Oversight? Well, hopefully by the end of this week or early next week, we'll issue some new recommendations around the Executive Order 203 plan. We're at a little over a year past that, and our team, actually two members of Dwayne's team that he loaned me, did an analysis of the EO 203 plan, and we're going to make some recommendations around that. So that should be forthcoming, and we'll share that with the board as well. We're working on the disciplinary matrix. So we received some comments, and we're trying to fully draft that and get that in a form that y'all can review and give us feedback about. So we've been working on that. We've also drafted a rule, so contemporaneously with accepting complaints, obviously the Policy and Oversight Division will accept complaints, and we want to be accessible to the community, but also to allow our partners and as well as you to have a formalized way to give us recommendations about what we should be looking at in the Policy and Oversight Division. So legal's taking a look at our draft rule, and once that is in place, we'll issue that, and you'll have a more direct conduit to the Policy and Oversight Division. Not that you don't already, you can all contact me, and I'm happy to talk with each and every one of you, but we'll have a more formalized system so that nothing falls through the cracks. So that's the upside, the update about Policy and Oversight. But what you invited me here today, I think, to talk about was our analysis of RPD's announced changes to their protest policies. So I think most of you or many of you have seen our report. It's up on our website. We issued it on May 26th. That includes 35 recommendations. They're mostly responsive to what RPD says they're going to do. Our main recommendation is that they release the actual policies, right? So we haven't seen the actual written policies. They've told us that they've implemented their policies. That sounds hard to do to me if you haven't reduced them to writing and distributed them to officers. So we're going to be watching to see if and when those are released, and we'll do a follow-up analysis once we have them. Some of the information that we do have suggests that the announced policies may not be how the language in the press release would be commonly understood. So there are things that are described as bans. It's not clear to us that they're bans in every circumstance. So they ban a number of weapons. They ban tear gas. They ban flashbangs. They significantly limit the use of pepper balls. They ban the use of LRAD tones. So some of them are maybe only bans in certain circumstances. So some limitations potentially are that these are only bans at peaceful protests. Well, that begs the question, what is a peaceful protest? Who decides when a protest is not peaceful and when they can use these weapons? So really we need to see the policies to fully evaluate them. And then we need to follow up to see how they're being implemented. Are they being implemented effectively through training? Is RPD following up with appropriate discipline or retraining where the policies are not followed? So we'll be doing that once they're released, and we'll be, continuing to watch. We also made a few recommendations that weren't directly responsive to their announced policies, but we think are potential holes. We have a section in our report that we call planning, communication, and proportionality. These recommendations mostly come from research, including recommendations by the ACLU about how to respond to protests. Basically, we're suggesting that RPD have a presence that's proportional to the protests so that they're not escalating things, that they've done planning in advance to try and de-escalate the situation before it begins, and to communicate, where their boundaries are and how they're going to respond. So that we make some recommendations around that. And I think that's the main substance of our recommendations. I mean, I'm happy to talk about any single recommendation. There are also things I think that are probably missing from our report, or maybe not missing, but are areas of future inquiry. So, things like surveillance, what type of surveillance is used at protests, what types of surveillance technology like stingrays, drones, counter surveillance. So looking at things like that, and also we did not do an analysis of their use of impact weapons like batons or kips or rubber bullets, basically the beanbag guns, the things that are now in every police car. So how will those be used? There were no announced changes to those things, but there are allegations in some lawsuits, that they're used inappropriately, that they're potential for abuse. And so we probably should take a closer look at how those weapons are used.
We have Rabbi Settle with a question, and then Harrison.
Yeah, so just can you tell the public where they can see a copy of this report?
Oh, absolutely. They can see it on our website, rockpab.org. The link is a little difficult to read out in full, but it's also been published. A link has been published to our Twitter feed.
Harrison, then Knox, then Wilson.
Mr. Higgins, maybe I'm getting confused somewhere in here, but you're saying that there are recommendations that you all have published?
That's right.
Have those recommendations been approved by the board?
Well, I did send them to the board for your review in advance of publishing them, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head. Right.
If we're going to investigate accusations of officer misbehavior as a board and decide whether they did or didn't misbehave, it seems like something similar should be applied to the evaluation of police protocols, that the board should have a say in whether they agree with what you all have proposed.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and a discussion for how, what the best way for us to interact and how you want to oversee the work of the staff at the PAB. Obviously, we take direction from you and in all those things. So one potential place to do that would be to include that in our rules for how we issue these reports. And so we do have a draft rule, and we'll share that rule with you, and you can tell us whether you like that or not.
And if I can just add to that explanation, the staff itself, senior staff reviewed those reports. I myself reviewed it, as well as other senior staff members prior to issuing them. There is a difference also in issuing those reports and submitting them for review to RPD, which triggers their time to respond to those recommendations. But if the board, prior to even issuing it publicly or submitting them to RPD for their response within the 60-day time frame that the charter allows for, then we can certainly, moving forward, submit it to the board so that you'll have an understanding of what's going on and a chance to raise any questions or corrections.
Go ahead, Mr. Knox.
Hi, and I'm sorry for not being on camera, but I'm driving, although I am pulled over at the moment. And Michael, so if you kind of go or speak a little bit more about when there's other law enforcement agencies, that are part of a response, just the thoughts around how to respond, like the state police or county, or another town is helping out. It requires a crowd control or demonstration, and just trying to figure out navigating that with different. They would have different rules and regulations, obviously, than our PD.
Yeah, so that's a problem with police governance, and this body does not have jurisdiction over other police entities that might operate within the city of Rochester. So that includes the Monroe County Sheriff's Office and the New York State Police, the troopers. We know that they have policy differences, right? So one is that the troopers permit the use of canines at mass gatherings and protests. RPD policy already prohibited that, but there were, is my understanding, that there were canines at the 2020 protests. So how do we effectively manage that? How should RPD effectively manage that? I mean, there's a number of ways. Our report recommends that they enter into formalized written agreements, basically, that will establish the rules for how these other entities will operate while they're in Rochester responding to a mass gathering or protest. We could imagine other ways, right? One would be like passing a state law. A state law could constrain all of these entities. That would, again, be something that we could consider recommending and then, seeking that the legislature pass if there were, broad agreement about it. That would be one effective legal mechanism to do it. Another is just to, encourage cooperation and have some sort of agreement about how, who will be in charge and how officers will be responsive. This is a broader issue, though. It's bigger than just what happens at mass gatherings and protests. So I'm sure you're all aware that RPD and the Monroe County Sheriff Office have announced that they'll be sharing staff to increase patrols within the city. So, the same question applies. Who are those officers accountable to? What policies and procedures will they follow while they're here in our city? We don't have all the answers to those, but we are, the Policy and Oversight Division is interested in looking at that further.
Thank you.
Okay, so a couple things. So for clarification, Mr. Higgins did submit the policy to the board for review and just looking for corrections or just looking for additional insight. It is up to the board to come up with a policy in order to review and approve. So that's on me. All right. So we can go ahead and look at that going forward to make sure that that's in place. And the second thing is, well, actually 3 questions. So 2 questions. So the second question would be, I'd like for you to tell the public about how you went about your research and how you came up with the policies that you did or your policy recommendations. And then the third thing will be, as a clinician, it's really important. One of the things I thought that the policy was missing was that I would love for RPD to be able to review and post something about the effects of a tear gas and some of these other chemical weapons on the public in a meta, we saw, there are some there's preliminary data that's very preliminary from 2020 that about how it affects women, especially women and female presenting people. But I think that, if RPD is going to be, justifying use of these chemical weapons or pepper balls even, right? We saw really gross injuries during the protests, people losing an eye, multiple people lost an eye. Then there should be a review, just like the Surgeon General has a warning, right? That these people, that the RPD has reviewed and looked into the medical impact of some of these weapons. So lots to say, but I wanted to get both of those things out. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I think that with respect to how we conducted our review, the first thing that we did was we looked at RPD's announcement, what it said, what it didn't say, compared that to their current policies and practices, and also what they've said publicly about what these policies mean and how they've implemented them. So we did a close reading of all of those things to compare, what does this say? What does it not say? And I think that told us a lot. How do we make other recommendations? Well, we looked at other policy recommendations and the evidence available around those. So what are other agencies doing? What does evidence-based research write about what we did? So we reviewed those materials. Whenever we made a recommendation, it's based on something that we read or the absence of information in the policies. So you can read our report. It's full of citations. So where we make a recommendation, the citation is there. That's how we made those recommendations. And I didn't do this at the beginning, but intended to. I just wanted to thank the primary authors of this report for my team, Sarah Jenks and Will Cleveland, who worked very hard to get this report out, under a compressed timeline, and I think did a good job. So I want to thank them. Your second point about that there should be more medical acknowledgement. So we did take a little bit of a look at that, and we did not find great literature about the effects of this. And so there's one group, I think they're called Physicians for Human Rights, and they basically concluded that there's insufficient evidence on the effects of chemical weapons, particularly like the long-term effects of them, to conclude that they're safe. And so because there's insufficient evidence, they shouldn't be used, right? If we don't know they're safe, we shouldn't use them because there is a potential for risk. And so we shouldn't employ them if we don't know what we're doing, basically. And then there's other questions about, there's allegations in the lawsuit that RPD used expired tear gas, and that mixing different kinds, there are different formulations, can be harmful. So, we don't have a full accounting necessarily of what they're using. We haven't obtained access to all the information yet. One recommendation we make, besides potentially getting rid of the weapons, formally banning them by not owning them, is to submit to an audit of their use. And part of, we could do that audit, right? And part of that would be reviewing what they do have, what they don't have, what they have used, and under what circumstance they've used it. So that might help respond to some of those questions, but also we will, if, Chair Wilson, if you have more information about, if you can use your expertise to point us in clearer directions on the medical literature, we welcome that assistance.
Yeah, there's only one medical paper that I've found, because when we did this discussion last year with the U of R, there's not a lot of evidence out there, but that's changing, especially after Portland, especially after some of the other cities. And the thing is to remember, a lot of these weapons have been banned by World Health Organization, right? The World Health Organization. And also, while we might not have like a lot of data right now, a lot of these historically are from like the turn of the century. And so what the impact was on people that actually were exposed to these types of chemical weapons over the last like 80 to 90 years. So, okay, so Dr. Harrison, Board Member Brown, and Rabbi Settle, and then we will be moving on. Thank you.
I'm trying to make sure that I'm clear on what I'm trying to say, Mr. Higgins. For all the time that I've been on this board, I've actually considered policy and procedure to be, if anything, more important than evaluating individual offices for malpractice, because changing a policy affects the entire police force and not just a single individual. Conversely, it says to me that having the board's approval, not just review, but approval of a paper on policy and procedure would be at least as important as evaluating an accused officer. Yeah, so to me, that's something that didn't happen, but should. Thank you. I'm not asking for your comment. I'm just telling you what I thought.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Bob. I hear you loud and clear.
Following up with Dr. Bob, and great evening, everyone. First, I want to thank and kudos to Dwayne and to Mike for the diligent work, for bringing the information to us and breaking it down in the simplest terms so that we all understand it. I appreciate it, so that I'm not, my eye rolling around in my head trying to figure out what you're speaking of. When Dr. Bob mentioned that the board really needs to review this, That's awesome. And we will get right on our JOB, because how we lay the track now will determine how this train is going to run years from now. And so as you all come up with various things that we need to address, as well as what the board sees it, you know, we need to look at that a little more. I thank you that you all are flexible and that we're all moving in the right direction. Kudos to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rabbi Settle?
I just want to emphasize, and because I don't know that it was sort of said clearly, though, obviously it isn't mentioned in the report, but these are chemical weapons that are banned in warfare and are being used on our citizens. And I think that it's really, really important to make that clear about why it's so essential that they, you know, that they be banned, and also what it means to say that, you know, that our city government would think it would be okay to use weapons that are banned in warfare on our citizens.
Yes, thank you for emphasizing that. The report does make the point that these weapons are outlawed in international warfare. Unfortunately, there is no domestic ban on using them against citizens.
Thank you so much, Mr. Higgins. We appreciate your update, and we will be working with you to come up with a protocol for the board to review upcoming policy. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and, oh, go ahead, Mr. Bosco. Go ahead.
If I may just add one other matter, that just a report that the board was provided a response to City Council in regards to questions related to everything from budget to policies and manuals, as well as case management. Hopefully the board was able to review those. Lastly, and I would ask for the board to approve a measure to place our bylaws on our website. We've gotten requests for our bylaws, and I don't see anything standing in our way. I've consulted with legal in regards to this, but I don't see anything standing in our way from making that available on our website. It just goes further to showing our transparency.
So question, do we need a vote on approving or putting bylaws on the website? Or can we just put them on the website?
What bylaws?
Our bylaws.
Well, what I'm asking is, I've seen something from staff about operating rules, but I'm not aware that we discussed it or voted on it. And the bylaws that we do have were put in place when we first formed as a board.
That's what they're talking about. That's what they're talking about. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That those bylaws I would agree with. These latest bylaws I don't.
Yeah, no. So we're talking about the previous bylaws that had been originally worked on by this board.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't believe we need a vote, but if anybody wants to vote. Okay. So Mr. Bosco, please go ahead and put the bylaws on the website.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, folks. Rabbi Settle, you have a training update?
I do. So the board was sent email with this information, but beginning Thursday, June 9th, we'll go back to our regular training schedule, and we're going to begin with a session with our staff attorney, AJ Derwin, to review the law, the city charter law establishing the PAB, because some of us did this at the beginning, but we have new members and we want to be sure everybody's on board and in the same place. And then we'll be working to familiarize ourselves with investigation procedures, with RPD, relevant RPD policies, and then our sorry, I'm doing this by heart. I didn't open I wasn't realizing I need to, but that our investigation manual, our policies and procedures, Oh, and then how we analyze reports and as well as the disciplinary matrix. So those are the topics that we'll be covering in our next round that'll take us through the summer. And I hope by then we'll be hearing cases or looking at cases, I should say.
Okay, thank you. And those dates and times were provided to you all through email, so please make sure that you have them in your calendars. Right, next item on the agenda. Okay, New York State Attorney General meeting. So, Mr. Bosco, would you like to speak about our meeting?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
So we had a meeting with the New York Attorney General's office to discuss their ongoing investigations into the manner in which the protests, mainly in 2020, but also in 2021, went, and certain violations that may or may not have occurred with RPD. They wanted to discuss further the opportunities to work together to further the investigation, and if they were to pull back, to have some type of agreement in place wherein the parameters of any type of rules and policies concerning addressing the misconduct or alleged misconduct that occurred during those protests, namely being able to have an audit of the use of those the materials. I'll say the materials that were used on the protesters, an audit of any type of training that went forth, an audit of any type of disciplinary actions that that have gone forth, and perhaps linking with us as an intermediary in order to help to review and oversee some of that materials in order to have RPD held accountable with the threat of civil lawsuits forthcoming if they fail to comply and turn over said materials. I thought it was a productive meeting, and although there's not going to be a public statement on their behalf because this is still an ongoing investigation, I do feel that there's room to work together with them moving forward. I attended the meeting as well as our Chief of Policy and Oversight, Mike Shawnee, our president of the board, was there as well. And I would like Mike to speak to any of the intricacies in regards to the actual questions that were put forth regarding how we have not seen the necessary cooperations with RPD as it pertains to turning over that type of data.
I can speak more about that, but if Rabbi Settle has a question before that, I'm happy to defer.
Just to say that if it's okay, if you can keep it, I'm a visual learner, so it's hard for me to sort of retain the information just given orally. So if there are any minutes from the meeting or in the future, if we have sort of things like this, if people can take notes and maybe, put something in writing to the board as well, I would find that very helpful. So thank you.
Great, we can do that. And Ms. Pacheco also advised me that in future conversations with y'all, I should be better prepared with a PowerPoint. So I'll do that in the future. So I'm not sure how much to say about the meeting with the Attorney General. I think it's, the New York Attorney General has the power to investigate police forces, to do what's called pattern and practice investigations. It's a little like what we're tasked with doing in the Policy and Oversight Division. And their goal, I think, is to create enduring change in the Rochester Police Department, and we're a potential avenue for that change. And so it's a natural thing for them to think about how the remedies they might seek might support our ongoing operations, or how we might collaborate and be a conduit also for community opinion including this board's opinion about, what outcomes should come from their own pattern and practice investigation or efforts to reform RPD. Because we're here, we're part of this community, we're going to be here, whether the AG is investigating RPD or not.
And if I may, Mike really brought up a very important part, and that is using us as a conduit to seek out public opinion in regards to the policies and procedures. That's one of the emphasis that the AG's office really made in regards to making sure that we're engaging the public to get their feedback on policies and procedures, to give them more of an avenue to seek corrections.
Board Member Brown?
Yes, I too had the privilege of being a part of that meeting, and the AG's office, even though she was not there, but representatives of her office were, and they were very, very interested in what's going on in Rochester and helping us reimagine safety here. They have opened their doors and their arms and want to hear from us as much as possible, especially what the community has to say and how they can help us move this forward.
Dr. Harrison, you were there as well. Did you want to say anything about this meeting?
No, thank you.
Well, okay.
I do. I was there for most of it also. I do want to add, they were also supportive of the mission of the PAB, which I think is kind of obvious that they're meeting with us, but they thought, it would be good to have partners in government, like with the express duties that we have as a PAB. That was something they said would be helpful for the mission of the AG's office to be able to work in collaboration with us in the city. So just that support of our mission and what the PAB has been asked to do by the public, they were 100% in agreement with and wanted it to be, a full partner.
Yeah, I thought it was, I agree. I thought it was, meeting was productive. I think that we need to make sure that we're partnering with the AG's office in order to get some of the cooperation that we need from RPD. And I think, if we have that, I think it would be very helpful. Hopefully we won't need it, but it would be wonderful to have, especially since they are also investigating what happened last year. So. Any other comments? Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Bosco and Mr. Higgins, for that update. Appreciate it. And we also have an investigations update coming up here.
Yes, I apologize. I thought I touched on the ongoing training of the investigators for this week as well as next week. One of the important outlines that still have yet to be resolved is the ride-alongs with the RPD, so that our staff really understands what goes into a day in the life of an officer, so that they can better facilitate any type of investigations. So hopefully that will be resolved on Monday.
Dr. Harrison.
Mr. Basco, I noticed that Chair Wilson asked you for a list. I don't think she used the exact term, but I would call it a punch list. Have you made any progress in preparing that?
In regards to a list, are you referring to a list of agenda matters that we would like to resolve?
I'm talking about what I refer to as a punch list. Do you know what I mean? It's used in construction.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. If I hire somebody to paint my house, they'll make a list of the things that need to be done in order to complete painting the house. Everything from sanding the wood to priming the wood to repairing rotten areas, all these different things that need to be done. And it's a list. and you check things off on it. And when you check the last thing off on the list, your job is done. And the question that I have is, do you actually have that kind of list for seeing complaints? Because that's what we're talking about. That's what council's talking about.
Yes. So there are two different aspects working right now. One is our punch list in order to take in complaints, and then our punch list in order to investigate those complaints. So as it pertains to taking in complaints, our interim case management system, that is going to be in place preferably by next week. We can get our staff trained up on that the following week so that there will be no issue in starting to take complaints on June 20th. A demo of that is what I would like, because there is still some confidential information regarding the case management system itself. I would not provide that demo on a live stream, but I do invite any board member that is interested in reviewing the interim case management system and how it works and operates, being able to provide you that information, that link, so that you can review that demo yourself. So by next week, after our meeting, we'll have that in place, and then staff will be fully trained on that by the following week, so that on June 20th, that's going to be operational. So that's the punch list for that. As it pertains to any type of intake form, that's already been established. So we're not waiting on that at all. The intake form, that's there, that's ready to go. The system is going to be operational by June 20th, so that's ready to go. As it pertains to investigating, there are certain parameters that are still left out there. One, the training academy is still ongoing. It should wrap up in the next 2 weeks. In addition to that, we are going to need access to RPD's database. Based upon my off-the-record conversations with several different RPD members and past members, it seems as though the best avenue to that is to have a direct access regarding passwords to that database and have it on a very extremely limited basis in regards to who would have that information, so that that information can be kept secure for not only state reasons, but also federal reasons in regards to any type of other investigations that are going on. In regards to body camera footage and access to body camera footage and evidence, the timely turning over of that information. Likewise, based upon conversations that I've had, that system, they've already have that system, and it's a mere the easiest form in which to get access to that system is simply to be added as a user on that system by a limited number of individuals to keep security at its utmost. So that should not be an issue moving forward. As it pertains to collection of data for the policy and oversight division, that should be worked out as well regarding our requests being done in a timely fashion in regards to a 5 business day window, which is something that we hope to negotiate on Monday in regards to making sure that the timely transmittal of that information is possible. In addition to that, we also have to work out a system wherein notification of any type of disturbances happen, and also having a designated individual that will be there for our investigators to be with, so that we can go beyond the yellow tape and observe the any type of matters that are going on in whether it be an officer involved shooting, an officer involved death, or any type of protest, or any other type of crime scene that we need access to. Lastly, is going to be parameters and an actual schedule so that we can do and conduct ride-alongs with our staff members so that they have a better understanding of what police officers are going through and what they're asked to do. I think that it benefits the investigators, but also it benefits the officers in letting them know that we're here to call balls and strikes. And we need that type of that type of I won't say team building, but relationship building in order to properly move forward. So those are the punch lists that I would say in order for investigations to really take hold and take off starting June 20th. And hopefully, based upon our conversation come Monday, we can have the majority of that already established by June 20th.
So it sounds like you have an impressive handle on the things that need to be done.
Yeah.
All I'm suggesting is make it a list that we can look at and know where you are.
So
Not-
I'm confused though. I thought that we had this list, Mr. Bosco. You submitted this list to the board yesterday. Is that correct? Okay, so Dr. Harrison, we have this list. The list is in the city council submission with the budget because the city council also asked for the same list. So that list does exist. But I think to kind of voice, kind of piggyback what Dr. Harrison is saying that, we need to be, carefully going over that list every time you see us to make sure that everything is going according to plan. So by next meeting, we would like to see what's been checked off and have that visual per Dr. or per Rabbi Settle. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Dr. Harvey. You're on mute. Did you want to speak?
Okay, so we plan to start hearing cases June 20th. Tell us receiving cases. We plan to start receiving cases on June 20th. Tell us, take us from receiving the case to the final authority and power that we have, complaints or whatever we call it. So what authority, what legal authority, once we receive the cases, what legal authority do we have with moving forward with that case? We've received the cases. Now, what can we do?
Sure. So under the charter, we have access to information in regards to personnel files for that particular officer or officers involved in the matter. We have access to body-worn camera footage. We have access to any other type of closed network circuit cameras in the facilities, as well as subpoena powers to gain access to any other ring footage that may be in the area. We also have the power to question the officer themselves, any witnesses involved in the matter. From there, we look at the video evidence, any type of forensic evidence that may be involved. We have access to the reports from PSS if they get the case first, or we get the case first and we have to turn it over to PSS, or any of the evidence collected by RPD to review that information, review the witness statements, review any type of camera footage, as well as reviewing the legal standards for misconduct based upon what is complained of. After we review all of that information, we'll draft a recommendation for disciplinary action based upon the disciplinary matrix that we have. From there, it'll go through several different revisions to make sure it's as accurate as possible. But from the final product, we will present that to the board along with the evidence and the basis for the decision. And then it's going to be incumbent on the board to whether or not you feel that it's sufficient to warrant the advice of myself and the investigators and staff attorneys to place that with RPD in order to have them take on any type of disciplinary procedures. As of right now, pending the case, however it's adjudicated in the appellate court. But we don't have disciplinary powers. So if the case comes back and we do have disciplinary powers, at that point, there's going to be a civil hearing in regards to that. But right now, as it stands right now, we don't have those powers, but we do have the ability to look at all the information and make recommendations to the chief regarding disciplinary actions.
All right, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Anybody have any more questions for Mr. Bosco? Okay, thank you so much to Mr. Bosco and Mr. Higgins for your thorough update. I really appreciate it. So thank you so much. Thank you for all of your hard work. And thank you to the staff as well for that.
Thank you.
Okay, folks. So we are at the point of the agenda where I'm going to go over. So there is no chair's report to submit. We do not have any committee reports as of yet. And we also don't have any old or new business to talk about except for what's in executive session. So for executive session tonight, we have posted this online, but we'll go ahead and say it again for the public. So, a portion of tonight's board meeting will be discussed in executive session, and the reasoning being to discuss potential litigation. That is all we can say because of the nature of that. And so we would, I'm going to ask for a motion to go ahead and go into executive session. I'm looking for a second, please. Motion seconded. Okay, all in favor of going to executive session? Okay, all right, motion passes. All right, folks, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you for hanging in there with us. And we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.